How does Dexter Jettster tell an angry customer on Mustafar that his takeout will take 10 days to deliver? How does Flo, the sassy unicycled server droid, tell if the Jawa juice has passed its expiration date? All of that and more on today's Star Wars lore episode. Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another Star Wars Canon and Legends lore video. Today we are talking about date and time in the Star Wars universe, specifically examining calendar and time systems from an in-universe perspective. Now, obviously the Star Wars galaxy is a big one, and the Chits are going to use a far different timekeeping system than either the Wookiees on Kashyyyk or the Coruscanti on Coruscant. Still, I will try to generalize. Before we begin, I just want to cover the basics of calendars and timekeeping. Assuming a civilization is somewhat similar to ours, which admittedly is not always true in the Star Wars universe, they will likely measure time as well as date. Both of these metrics should be based on the movement of their home planet, with date measured reference to a planet's orbit around its star, and time measured in reference to a planet's day and night cycle. If you're confused, don't worry, I'll get into this more in depth, but obviously based on a planet's orbit and rotation time, a civilization's year and day could vary quite drastically in length. Time, as I mentioned, is usually made in reference to a planet's rotation, with one full rotation being a day, and with a day often further subdivided into hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds, etc. On a calendar scale, a year will typically be a full orbit around the planet's star, with a year being further divided into months and days, or perhaps seasons. For calendar making and the recording of history, years are usually stated in reference to an epoch or epoch. You can think of that as a year zero. For example, a common one for us when looking at the Star Wars universe from an out-of-universe perspective is the Battle of Yavin. Dates are referred to as being however many days, months, and years before or after the Battle of Yavin. Now that we have some understanding of dates and timekeeping, let's now look at it from an in-universe perspective. Obviously, as I explained at the beginning of the video, many systems or planets would have their own timekeeping method. This would obviously depend on their interaction with the rest of the galaxy and the circumstances of their homeworld. That being said, for many planets, timekeeping was done in accordance with the Galactic Standard Calendar. This calendar set both time and date for the rest of the Star Wars galaxy, or at least the parts of the galaxy that followed Coruscant time. A single day under the Galactic Standard Calendar had 24 hours, with each hour having 60 minutes and with each minute having 60 seconds. In other way, the exact same as most of us do it in the real world. Time was made in reference to what time it was on Coruscant. Because the Star Wars universe doesn't really mess with time dilation, Coruscant time would be the same whether you were on even a distant planet or starship. Obviously, the system does have limitations. If you're on a planet that has a day and night cycle in the dozens or hundreds of hours, obviously Coruscanti time won't be terribly important to you. That's extra true if you're someone like a farmer or really just an ordinary citizen. However, Coruscanti time would be useful for people like politicians or especially military leaders, people that need to coordinate time across the galaxy. Returning to date keeping, a single Coruscanti year was 368 days long. In other words, after 368 24-hour periods, a single galactic standard year had passed. Days were also grouped into 5 to 7 day weeks, depending on the source. A year could also be further subdivided into months, again depending on the source. The Coruscanti year used either 10 or 12 months, with various holiday and vacation weeks. When making reference to date within the Star Wars universe under the Galactic Standard Calendar, you would do it in the following format: year, month, date. However, as I mentioned earlier, when talking about years, you need an epoch or a 0 year. The most famous epoch was the Battle of Yavin, but that is largely because of its prominence out of universe. The restandardized Galactic Calendar, or just perhaps the Yavin system, is used both in and out of universe as an epoch, with the 0 point being the Battle of Yavin. Everything is made in reference to either years before the Battle of Yavin, also known as BBY, or years after the Battle of Yavin, ABY. For example, the Battle of Endor took place 4 ABY, while the Clone Wars occurred from 22 BBY to 19 BBY. This calendaring system was developed by the New Republic after the Battle of Endor. Obviously, given the strong New Republic / Rebel Alliance bias inherent in this date method, it wouldn't be used by several factions. Obviously, the Imperial Remnant would not be referring to time and date based on ABY and BBY. Unsurprisingly, there are countless other epochs which have been used either with or separate from the Galactic Standard Calendar throughout Star Wars history. After the Battle of Endor, the second most famous epoch probably comes from the Galactic Resynchronization. That system uses the date of the resynchronization itself, which is in and of itself arbitrary, in order to set a 0 point. This happened several decades before the Battle of Yavin and was basically the Republic's attempt to clean up their timekeeping and date-keeping system. In the real world, this was also used to clean up some date mishaps and inconsistency in the old expanded universe. I think it's likely that the Empire and later the Imperial Remnant may have used this epoch, although it's also very likely that they developed their own based on the formation of the Empire. Other epochs and calendar systems include the Naboo calendar, which uses the settlements of Naboo as its point zero. We also have the Ruusan calendar, with point zero being the Ruusan Reformation, the Tho-Yor calendar, which I quite like and uses the arrival of the Tho-Yor on various planets as point zero. And in canon, we've also seen the Lothal calendar, which uses a point zero of several thousand years in the past. One final thing I want to address in this video is a question that I'm sure some of you have been wondering. Why is the Yavin system so prominent? This was recently covered by Pablo Hidalgo on Twitter. I'm not going to go over it in depth, just give you guys the basics. If you want to read more, make sure to follow him. But just generally, it comes from the fact that for a long time, the expanded universe did not have a formal chronology. The only hints that the books gave was whether something was before or after Star Wars: A New Hope, and that was based largely on the age of Luke Skywalker. In the 90s, a timeline was finally made with A New Hope, and I guess the Battle of Yavin as well, as its 0 point. At this point, things were referred to as before Star Wars, so for example, you'd have BSW4 to reference 4 years before Star Wars, or after Star Wars, for example, ASW10. With the creation of the Essential Chronology, a reference book, a formal timekeeping system was developed, but since the before and after Star Wars system was already so ingrained in the mind of publishers, writers, and readers, they really just changed it in notation, changing it from before and after Star Wars to before and after the Battle of Yavin. The only thing to keep in mind is that while this is obviously very prevalent from an out-of-universe perspective, its use in-universe would be greatly diminished, and there were thousands, if not millions and billions, of other calendar-keeping methods. Anyways, that's all for today. If you guys have other questions that you'd like to see answered, make sure to leave them down in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and hey, as always, this has been EckhartsLadder. May the Force be with you.